I'm going to burn everything you love. The words tore out of Douglas Hale before he could stop them, his voice a hoarse whisper through the apartment door at 2:13 a.m. Nora Sinclair stands frozen in the pitch-black living room, her breath caught in her throat like a bird trapped in a cage. She can see his shadow under the door frame, shifting, waiting. 3 feet away, her 6-year-old daughter Emma sleeps on the pull-out couch, blonde hair fanned across the pillow, completely unaware that the man outside has been stalking them for 8 months. The blizzard outside howls against the windows. Snow pelts the glass. Wind screams through the cracks in the frame. Visibility is 0. Nora's apartment is freezing. The heat shut off 2 days ago when the utility company cut her line for non-payment. She grips the baseball bat by the door, knowing it is useless. Worse than useless. Hopeless. Douglas works as an accountant downtown, or so everyone believes. What Nora knows is different. He has connections. Police officers who ignore her restraining orders. Judges who lose her paperwork. A network of friends who believe his version of the story, not hers. Not a single person in Los Angeles has ever seen Douglas Hale as anything but charming, accomplished, a man simply trying to win back his ex-girlfriend who refuses to be reasonable. His shadow moves again. A soft knock. Then silence. That silence is worse than the threat. On her kitchen table, 3 rooms away, sits a stack of papers that would explain why Nora is willing to stand in a freezing apartment at 2:13 a.m. instead of calling the police she no longer trusts. A foreclosure notice for $125,000, due in 7 days. Medical bills from Emma's emergency surgery 2 years ago. Eviction papers stamped with a red date that has already passed. And sitting on top of all of it, counted for times under lamplight an hour ago, exactly $78 in crumpled bills. That is all she has left in the world. Douglas's voice comes again, softer this time, almost pleading. She didn't do anything wrong. She just needs to talk to him. Needs to understand that he loves her. The words are ice water in Nora's veins because she has heard them before, the night he broke her collarbone. The night he locked her in the bathroom for 6 hours because she wore a shirt he didn't approve of. The night she made the decision that would change her life. She had run. Packed Emma at midnight. Driven 3 hours in a car with bald tires. Rented this apartment using a fake name, working 3 jobs to pay cash for the first month's deposit. Everything in her life for the past 8 months has been about staying invisible. But invisibility has a cost. Nora moves away from the door, away from Emma, into the kitchen. She opens the drawer where she keeps the used envelopes, the ones with calculations written on them. Rent, $800 per month. Food, $130. Emma's school lunch program, $85. Utilities, $120. Gas to drive to her 3 jobs, $200. Medicine, $40. Phone, $45. Everything adds up to numbers that are larger than the $78 in her pocket. 6 hours earlier, none of this mattered because Nora Sinclair was about to do something that would set off a chain of events no one could predict. She was about to find something that didn't belong to her. And she was going to do the one thing that people like her are never supposed to do. She was going to be honest. The parking garage at the Westfield Plaza is empty at 8:33 p.m. on a December evening. The snow is coming down in sheets so thick that Nora can barely see the front of her 2008 Honda Civic as she parks it in the corner, far away from the shopping center lights. She works at the plaza tonight, closing shift at the diner where she has been serving coffee for $4 an hour plus tips she counts on her drive home. The foreclosure papers are due in 7 days. Nora cuts the engine and sits for a moment, hands on the steering wheel, forehead pressing against her palms. She hasn't slept more than 3 hours a night in 8 months. Emma keeps having nightmares about the man who used to yell. Nora keeps having nightmares about the bills. She opens the car door. The cold hits her like a slap across the face. She is wearing a coat from a thrift store, a size too large, with a broken zipper that she has held together with a safety pin. Underneath it she wears the diner uniform, a polyester dress designed for someone 10 pounds heavier, and underneath that, 2 thermal shirts because the diner's heating system works only half the time. The walk from the parking spot to the diner entrance takes 45 seconds. Nora has timed it. She counts the steps as she walks. 1, 2, 3. The snow crunches under her shoes, and she thinks about how snow is beautiful only when you have heat to go home to. Her shift starts at 5:06 p.m. and ends at 11:36 p.m. She serves coffee to people who leave $2 tips on $40 checks. She listens to conversations about vacations she will never take. She smiles at men who look through her like she doesn't exist, and she clears plates of food she would have eaten yesterday if she had the money. At 11:15 p.m., just before closing, a man comes in alone. He is tall, broad-shouldered, wearing an expensive cashmere coat that costs more than everything Nora owns. His hair is dark, silvered at the temples. There is a scar running from his right eye to his cheekbone, white against his olive skin. He orders black coffee and sits at the corner booth, not reading the menu, not looking at anything. Just waiting. Nora serves him without making eye contact. The rule she has learned is simple: invisible is safe. But the man does not leave when the diner closes. He sits in the booth, hands wrapped around the coffee cup, watching the staff clean. Nora's manager, Tony, sees him watching and becomes nervous in a way that she has not seen before. Tony stops talking. Tony's movements become careful. Tony opens the register and counts money with shaking hands. At 11:38 p.m., the man stands up and walks toward the door. He reaches into his coat pocket. Nora's heart stops. She has learned to recognize the moment when violence is about to happen. She has learned the sound of that moment. The weight in the air. But the man pulls out his wallet. He drops $50 on the table for his coffee. He walks to the door. And on his way out, the wallet falls from his coat pocket onto the tile floor. The sound it makes is small. Leather against ceramic. Almost nothing. Nora watches the man leave. She watches his shadow pass the window and disappear into the parking garage. For a moment, the diner is completely silent. Tony is holding the register drawer open. Michelle, the other waitress, is frozen with a rag in her hand. Nora picks up the wallet. It is waterlogged, leather cracked and darkening, the suede lining soaked through. She opens it carefully. The bills inside are wet but present. American currency. A lot of it. Behind the bills are photographs. She sees a woman's face pressed against a dead man's chest. She sees a city skyline. She sees a child, maybe 5 years old, with the same scar tissue running down his left arm that the tall man has on his face. In the ID slot, she sees a name, Alejandro Calabrese. Tony makes a noise, a small exhale like all the air has left his body. Michelle sets down her rag very slowly. "Don't," Tony says. Nora looks up. "Don't what?" she asks. "Don't keep it. Don't spend it. Don't even think about it," Tony says. His voice has changed completely. It has become the voice of someone who understands that she is holding something that belongs to a man who has the power to erase her entirely. "Put it back. Right now. Put it back in the parking garage where he can find it and pretend this never happened." "But you don't know who that man is," Michelle whispers. Nora knows who that man is because she has heard people whisper his name in the diner for 4 months. Alejandro Calabrese. The name moves through Los Angeles with the weight of mythology. A man who built an empire out of something dark. A man who crawled from a childhood of his father's fists to command an organization that police are afraid to touch. A man whose wallet she is holding in her frozen hands. The wind outside screams. Snow continues to fall in sheets that make the world invisible. Nora thinks about the foreclosure papers. She thinks about the $78 in her pocket. She thinks about Emma's school lunch program that ends next month when the money runs out completely. She thinks about the photograph inside the wallet. The woman pressed against the dead man's chest. "I found it," Nora says quietly. "No, you didn't," Tony says. "I found it in the parking garage. I'm going to try to return it." Michelle's face goes pale. Tony sits down in the nearest booth like his legs have stopped working. The diner is so quiet you can hear the wind against the windows, the ice scraping the glass, the sound of a world freezing over. Nora puts the wallet in her coat pocket. She clocks out. She walks into the parking garage at 11:52 p.m., still wearing her diner uniform under the broken zipper coat. She walks to her 2008 Honda Civic with the ball tires. She sits in the driver's seat and opens the wallet again. Behind the photographs, in the innermost pocket, she finds something small. A prayer card, worn from decades of being carried, the image of a saint faded almost completely away. On the back, in handwriting that is shaky with age, words, "Take care of the child. He deserves better than we did." Nora's hands are shaking. She looks up the address from the ID. She drives through the blizzard for 22 minutes, following GPS through streets she has never seen, until she arrives at a house that is not really a house. It is a fortress. Black gates. Security lights. Iron walls. She can see the shapes of men moving behind the windows. She parks across the street. She sits in her freezing car. And then she does what people like her are never supposed to do. She walks up to the gate and presses the intercom button. The wind tore through the parking garage like a blade wrapped in ice, howling through the concrete corridors as Nora Sinclair pushed through the stairwell door at 8:16 p.m. She wore a thin jacket, the zipper broken for 3 weeks now, held together with a safety pin that had started to rust, over her diner uniform, which was still damp from the lunch shift. Her fingers were numb. She could barely feel the grocery bags cutting into her wrists. $1.37 of rice. 2 cans of beans on sale. A single rotisserie chicken that she would stretch across for dinners. The blizzard had turned Los Angeles into something unrecognizable. 19 degrees. Visibility maybe 3 feet if you were lucky. The streets had emptied 2 hours ago, everyone fleeing to homes with working heaters and people waiting for them. Nora had just finished her 3rd job of the day, night cleaning at a downtown office building where she earned $12 an hour to scrub toilets and empty waste baskets while the executive's coffee cup sat on mahogany desks worth more than her entire apartment. 7 hours of work. $84. Taxes would take 15 of that. She cut through the parking garage to escape the wind. The garage was nearly empty this late, just a few vehicles scattered across the massive concrete expanse like abandoned things. Her breath made clouds in the freezing air. Her sneakers, the sole separating from the canvas, wet through completely from the snow, made small squeaking sounds on the concrete. That was when she saw it. Wedged between a concrete pillar and a storm drain, leather dark against the grey concrete, partially hidden beneath a drift of snow. A wallet. Nora approached it slowly, the way someone approaches an injured animal. She crouched down and picked it up with both hands. The leather was waterlogged, cracked along the seams, but the craftsmanship was evident even in its ruin. This was not a discount store wallet. This was something made to last. She opened it carefully. No cash. No credit cards. But inside, in the innermost compartment, a single photograph, laminated and preserved with care. A woman's face pressed against a dead man's chest, her eyes closed, tears streaming down her face. She was clinging to him like he might disappear if she let go. Behind her, you could see a hospital room. The moment captured, grief, love, farewell, all frozen in time. Something in Nora's chest cracked open. She knew that kind of pain. She had held her mother's hand while the machines beeped and the nurses spoke in quiet voices and the bills accumulated on the kitchen table. She had felt that same desperate clinging to someone who was already leaving. The photograph was so tender, so intimate, that it felt wrong to even look at it. But she could not look away. Behind the photograph, a business card. Calabrese Imports. An address in Beverly Hills. No name, but the card was thick stock, embossed, the kind of card that meant something in this city. Nora sat back on her heels, the wallet heavy in her hands. She could sell it. Right now, tonight, she could walk to the pawn shop 3 blocks from her apartment. Broken leather or not, the craftsmanship alone might get her $30. $40 if she was lucky. That was $40 toward the $1,200 she owed her landlord in 3 days. That was $40 toward the $22,000 foreclosure notice sitting on her kitchen table next to Emma's kindergarten homework. But the photograph. That woman's face. That moment of goodbye. Nora put the wallet in her coat pocket. The drive home took 9 minutes. Her 2008 Honda Civic with bald tires and an engine that coughed whenever the temperature dropped below freezing, she had somehow kept it running through sheer will and YouTube tutorials. The heater barely worked. Ice formed on the inside of the windshield as she drove, and she had to wipe it away with her bare hand every 30 seconds. The defrost was broken. Everything was broken. She parked in the cramped lot behind her apartment building at 9:16 p.m. The building had not been painted in 12 years. The roof leaked in the master bedroom. The neighbor upstairs played music until midnight every night. But it was $280 a month cheaper than anything else within 15 miles, which meant it was home. Emma was already asleep. Nora found her in the small second bedroom, curled under a blanket that was held together with patches, her kindergarten homework still scattered across the floor, a worksheet about counting to 10, each number carefully traced in Emma's shaky, determined handwriting. Nora picked up the papers and arranged them on the small desk. The school lunch program ended next month when the current funding ran out. She did not know how she would feed Emma lunch at school next month. She was already $183 behind on the lunch account. She sat at the kitchen table under the single lamp that worked. The apartment was so cold she could see her breath. The heater had stopped working yesterday. The landlord had not returned her calls for 6 weeks. She would have to pay someone to fix it, another $300 she did not have, or she would have to prove the landlord was not maintaining the property, which meant legal fees, which meant a lawyer, which meant impossible. The wallet sat on the table in front of her. Nora opened it again. She looked at the photograph for a long time. The woman's face. The dead man's chest. The moment before goodbye. She thought about that prayer card she had found tucked behind the photo, ancient, worn, the saint's image faded to almost nothing. On the back, in handwriting that shook with age, "Take care of the child. He deserves better than we did." She pulled out a piece of paper and wrote, in careful handwriting, "Found this. Thought you might want it back." She did not sign her name. She did not include a return address. She folded the note and placed it in the envelope with the wallet. At 10:02 p.m., she walked for blocks through the blizzard to the mailbox on the corner of 5th and Morrison. The snow fell so thick she could barely see the street. Her feet were numb. The mailbox was cold metal against her bare hands. She slipped the envelope inside and released it. It fell into the darkness below with a soft sound, like a prayer. What Nora did not know, as she walked back home through streets that had turned to ice, was that she had just set something in motion that would unravel the carefully constructed boundaries of 2 separate worlds. What she did not know was that Alejandro Calabrese had torn apart half of Los Angeles searching for that wallet. His wife Maria had died 2 years ago from cancer. That photograph was the last one ever taken of her alive, the final moment before the disease took her ability to stand, to smile, to hold him back. He had carried the wallet every day since her death. When he lost it 3 weeks ago, something in him had fractured completely. He had not slept. He had not spoken. He had simply retreated into his study, where the portrait of Maria hung on the wall, watching him with sad eyes. At 11:24 a.m. the next morning, the envelope arrived at the Calabrese mansion. Not the office. The house itself. Security was normally impenetrable, no mail went directly to the residential address without being intercepted, scanned, analyzed. But this envelope had been redirected through the postal system to the business address first, then forwarded, which meant it bypassed the usual protocols. Vinnie opened it. Vinny, who had worked for Alindro for 23 years, who had killed for him and died for him and would do both again without hesitation. He opened the envelope and saw the wallet, and his hands trembled so badly he had to set it down. He walked to Alindro's study and knocked once. Without waiting for an answer, he entered. Alindro was standing at the window, watching the storm clear, the sun beginning to break through the clouds. He had not turned around. "Sir," Vinny said quietly. "Your wallet." Alindro turned. For a moment he did not move. Then he took the envelope from Vinny's hands and opened it. He saw the photograph. He saw his wife's face. He saw the prayer card. He read the note, "Found this. Thought you might want it back." "Trace it," he said, his voice like thunder. "Everything. The fingerprints, the envelope, the postal code, every camera in every building between here and that mailbox. I want a name, an address, and a complete profile by sunset." By noon, they had everything. Nora Sinclair. 28 years old but looking decades older. Single mother. 3 jobs. Rent 14 days overdue. Foreclosure notice for $22,000. Daughter named Emma, age 5, enrolled at Lincoln Elementary. 3 active restraining orders filed against one Douglas Hale, a man with connections to at least 12 police officers and a network of lawyers that had kept him out of jail for 8 years despite overwhelming evidence of assault, stalking, and witness intimidation. Alindro read the profile in silence. His face showed nothing. But in his chest, something cold and dangerous was beginning to move. The apartment was so cold you could see her breath in the dim light filtering through the single window. Nora stood at the peephole, her eye pressed against the brass circle, watching 3 men in black coats shed snow onto the hallway carpet like animals shaking off water. The man in front was tall, maybe 40, with dark eyes that seemed to catalogue everything they touched. A scar ran from his eye to his cheekbone like a blade had once tried to cut him in half. Behind him stood 2 others, shoulders broad enough to block out the hallway light, their stillness suggesting they were trained to be invisible until needed. Emma sat on the couch behind her mother, clutching a worn prayer card, her grandmother's, the only thing Nora had left from a family that no longer existed. The child watched the door with the particular awareness of someone who had learned very young that doors opening meant something changing, usually something bad. The man spoke through the wood, his voice low and steady like a stone settling at the bottom of a well. "Miss Sinclair, my name is Alindro Calabrese. You returned something that belonged to me. I came to thank you." Nora's hand trembled on the doorknob. The name was familiar from the business card tucked inside the wallet. She called through the door, her voice barely holding its shape. "You're welcome. You can go now." Alindro did not move. The hallway remained filled with his presence and the snow melting off 3 coats. "I know you are afraid. I know someone has been threatening you. I am not here to hurt you. I am here because I need to understand why a woman with $78 in her pocket would mail back a wallet instead of pawning it." Silence stretched between them, thick as concrete. "I traced who you are," he continued, his voice carrying the weight of someone accustomed to being listened to. "I know about Douglas Hale. I know the police will not help you. I know you are drowning." How does he know that word? How does he know that specific shape of my terror? "Open the door," Alindro said. "Let me see your face. 5 minutes. Then I will leave if you ask." Nora opened the door a crack. Alindro Calabrese stood there, snow in his dark hair, wearing a cashmere coat that cost more than 3 months of her rent. Not threatening. Exhausted. He held up the wallet, and inside the clear pocket was the photograph she had found, a woman's face pressed against a dead man's chest, and now she understood. The dead man was him. "This photograph is all I have left of my wife," he said quietly. "You gave it back when you had nothing. I want to know why." She stepped back. He stepped inside. The apartment was a geography of poverty. The radiator clanked and hissed but produced no heat. The kitchen table had one wobbly leg propped up with a textbook. Bills lay scattered across the counter like autumn leaves. Alejandro saw the foreclosure notice immediately, $22,000 owed, 30 days to vacate. He saw the stack of rejection letters. 17 in 3 weeks. He saw the way Emma watched him, the way prey watches a predator. He sat down across from Nora at the kitchen table without being invited. His lieutenants, Vinny and Theo, remained in the hallway with the snow still melting from their shoulders. "Why did you return the wallet?" he asked again. "Because it wasn't mine," Nora said. "You needed money. You still do. That photograph, whoever she was, she mattered to someone. I know what it's like to lose someone." The words came out broken, like something fractured inside her chest was finally splitting open. She told him about her husband, Michael, who died 4 years ago in a construction accident. No life insurance. No safety net. Just a widow with a child and a mountain of debt that grew higher every month. 3 jobs, she whispered. "I walk 6 miles a day because I cannot afford a bus pass. I count crumpled bills by lamplight. I tell Emma that we are saving for a house, but the truth is I am saving for next week's groceries." Alejandro's jaw tightened when she described Douglas Hale, how he had appeared at her workplace, how the letters started, how they became threats, how the police laughed when she filed restraining orders. "My late husband's cousin is a sergeant at the 14th precinct," she said. "He visits the precinct. They ignore every call I make." Alejandro listened without interrupting. When she finished, he asked one question: "How much do you need to survive?" $22,000 for the foreclosure, she said. "But I need $125,000 in 7 days to actually save this apartment and pay off the debt. It is impossible. I have accepted that." Alejandro was silent for a long moment. Then he leaned forward, and his eyes met hers with the intensity of someone looking at a mirror. "I am going to tell you something my men have never heard me say. 15 years I have run my business. I have negotiated with senators and criminals. I have never shown weakness. But 2 years ago, my wife Maria died in my arms at 3 in the morning in a hospital room, and I could not save her. I had all the money in the world and it meant nothing. I lost that wallet the night of her funeral. I thought I would never see her face again. You gave her back to me." His voice dropped to something barely audible. "You saved me on the worst night of my life. Let me save you on yours." In the hallway, Vinny and Theo exchanged a look neither had seen on the other's face in 15 years. Shock. Something that might have been tears. Emma spoke from the couch, her 5-year-old voice cutting through the weight of the moment like a blade through water. "Mommy is sad a lot." Nora's breath caught. She had not realized Emma noticed. Alejandro turned to look at the child. "Your mommy is the bravest person I have ever met. She is not sad. She is strong." Emma considered this. Then she held up the worn prayer card. "Colors for sad days. When she feels sad, I show her this." The prayer card was faded, its edges soft from years of handling. On it were faint watercolor sketches, flowers in blues and greens, a bird in flight, a small house with a door open. Alejandro looked at Nora. "Your mother." "My mother," Nora whispered. "She drew that the week before she died. I was 7. Alejandro stood. "Pack a bag for you and Emma. Enough for 3 days. You are coming with me." "What?" "No. I cannot just. Douglas Hale will escalate tonight. I saw his car 2 blocks away. He knows I was here. He will come for you, and the police will not stop him. You can stay here and wait, or you can let me protect you until I finish handling this." Outside, the blizzard had intensified. Wind howled down the hallway, rattling the windows. Somewhere far below, a siren wailed. Nora looked at Emma, at the prayer card in her small hands, at the foreclosure notice on the kitchen table. 3 days, Nora said. Then I go back to my life. 3 days, Alejandro agreed, though his eye suggested he was calculating something far longer. They drove in a black SUV through the snow-choked streets. The windows were tinted dark. Emma fell asleep between them, her head against Nora's shoulder, the prayer card still clutched in her small fist. The car climbed into the hills, away from the apartment, away from Douglas Hale, away from the life that had been slowly drowning her. But what she did not know, Evelyn Blackwell had already made 17 calls. At that same hour, Nora's name was being whispered in the right ears at the right clubs. A woman unreliable. A woman desperate. A woman who could not be trusted. The poisoning had begun, and by morning, every job Nora might have applied for would know not to hire her. And Douglas Hale, sitting in his car 2 blocks from her abandoned apartment, was planning his move for exactly 2:13 a.m., when the city would be silent enough for him to make his statement clear. The marble floor of Alindro's mansion stretched in every direction like a frozen lake, cold beneath Nora's worn shoes as a housekeeper in pressed white gloves led her through corridors hung with paintings that probably cost more than everything she had ever owned. Emma's eyes grew wide, her small hand gripping Nora's jacket. The guest suite had 2 bedrooms, a bathroom with heated floors, soft beds that sank like clouds when you touched them. Emma fell asleep immediately, still clutching the prayer card, her breathing deepening within minutes. But Nora could not sleep. She sat by the window at 2:24 a.m. watching the blizzard intensify, wind screaming down the hillside, and felt the creeping dread of a terrible mistake settling into her bones like ice water. What had she done? Accepting shelter from a stranger, even a powerful one, even one who claimed to want to help. She was making everything worse. Downstairs, Alindro stood in his study surrounded by men in dark suits. The room smelled like expensive cigars and old leather. His voice moved through the space steady and deliberate. Find everything. Every crime he committed that disappeared. Every officer who took his money. Vinny, compact and scarred across his left temple, pulled up financial records on 3 screens. His fingers moved across the keyboard with precision. Douglas Hale, 48 years old, arrested 3 times for DUI. All charges buried. Assault complaint in 2016 dropped within a week. Another in 2019. Same pattern, buried. Theo, tall with silver streaking through his dark hair, spoke from the leather chair near the fireplace. His voice carried the weight of someone who had seen too many lies turn into tragedy. I have a contact in the 14th precinct. Sergeant Ramon Diaz. He's been taking payments from Hale for 7 years. Minimum $2,000 per complaint filed and then erased. The room went quiet except for the hum of the servers. Alindro's jaw tightened. His hand moved to the gold watch at his wrist, a gesture Vinny and Theo had learned to recognize as dangerous precision. How many other women? For that we can confirm, Theo said. At least one more the records don't show. Alindro's eyes closed for a single breath. When they opened, something cold had settled there. Bring me everything on Evelyn Blackwell as well. Phone records, financial transfers, meeting notes. Everything. He moved to the window, looking out at the blizzard consuming the city below. They will both understand what it means to make an enemy of someone you underestimated. At 2:13 a.m. in the apartment Nora had abandoned, Douglas Hale arrived at her door and found her gone. His rage became something physical, something that needed an outlet. He pounded on the door frame until his knuckles bled, then whispered through the gap, his voice low and poisonous. I'm going to burn everything you love. Everything. You cannot hide from me. He left a note beneath her door, a promise written in shaky handwriting that made no threats directly but suggested horrors. Then he drove toward the hills, trying to follow the black SUV that had taken her, but the snow was too heavy and the city too vast and she had already disappeared into a world he could never penetrate. He pulled over 3 miles away and sat gripping the steering wheel, breathing hard, already calculating his next move. At the same moment, 2 blocks from the mansion where Nora slept, Evelyn Blackwell sat in her study making phone calls. Her voice was smooth as silk, dripping with manufactured concern. Yes, that's what I heard as well. The single mother at Emma's school, very sad situation, but you know, there are concerns about her stability. She's been struggling financially, I hear. Living in what I can only describe as poverty. Not the kind of influence you want around your children. The calls continued. One to the director of the temp agency where Nora had applied. One to the manager at the restaurant that had promised her weekend shifts. One to the superintendent of Emma's school. The poisoning spread like ink through water. By the time the sun rose, Nora would be radioactive, untouchable, a woman every institution in Los Angeles had been warned against. At 6:06 a.m., Nora woke to the sound of her phone vibrating. Then again. Then again. She sat up slowly, her chest already tight, and read the screen in the grey dawn light filtering through the mansion windows. Message from the temp agency: we regret to inform you that we will not be moving forward with your application at this time. Another message: due to recent information, we have decided to discontinue your scheduled shifts. Then an email from Emma's school with the subject line: concerns regarding your fitness as guardian. The email was signed by Evelyn Blackwell, PTA president. Nora's hands began to shake. She made it to the marble bathroom before her legs gave out. Cold tile against her knees. Her reflection in the mirror looked like someone she no longer recognized, someone hollowed out and defeated. 31 years old and drowning. The voice in her head started whispering. Maybe Emma would be better off without you. Maybe you should just disappear and let someone else take care of her. Someone stable. Someone with money. Someone who has not already failed her. Her vision blurred. She gripped the sink so hard her nails left crescents in the edge. The sleet from the blizzard pelted the window like accusations. Then, a soft knock. Emma's small voice from the other side of the door, barely a whisper. "Mama? Are you okay?" That one tiny thing stopped everything. Nora's breath caught. She forced herself to unlock the door and Emma stood there in borrowed pajamas 3 sizes too large, holding the prayer card, looking up with eyes that held too much understanding for a child so small. "I'm okay, baby. Mama's okay." But she was not okay, and downstairs, Alejandro knew it. He stood in his study watching the news report come through on the screen, Vinny's face grim beside him. The temp agency just reported that they received a call from someone claiming to represent multiple references from your background. Alejandro's voice emerged like venom. "Get me everything Evelyn Blackwell has touched in the last 2 months. Bank transfers, phone records, meeting logs. Everything." The strike came at 7:51 a.m. Alejandro made a single call to a federal contact, someone with a long memory and a longer sense of loyalty. He delivered the file personally, watching as the other man's expression darkened with each detail. Douglas Hale. Buried crimes. Systematic stalking of 4 women. Payments to Sergeant Ramon Diaz totaling $112,000. The contact listened in silence, then said only, "Give me 2 hours." By 9:48 a.m., 12 agents in tactical gear surrounded Douglas Hale's apartment in a building that smelled like stale cooking oil and desperation. They wore black vests marked FBI in white letters. Their movements were synchronized, efficient, like a machine that had been calibrated for violence. They breached the door at 9:23 a.m. Douglas was in his kitchen drinking coffee from a chipped mug, still wearing the same clothes from the night before, when the agents came through like thunder. He tried to run. 2 agents moved faster, bodies slamming him against the counter with enough force to crack the tile. Handcuffs clicked closed around his wrists. His voice broke immediately, begging, pleading, claiming innocence as his face pressed against the cold surface. "Please, please, I didn't do anything. You have the wrong person." An agent read the charges in a voice that carried no mercy. Stalking. Harassment. Conspiracy to interfere with a police investigation. Obstruction of justice through bribery. 40 years federal prison. No parole eligibility. Douglas collapsed into sobs, trembling like a wounded animal dragged from its den, as cameras outside captured every moment. The arrest played on every news channel in Los Angeles by 10:51 a.m. The story spread like wildfire. By noon, 2 million people had seen the footage. At 11:38 a.m., federal agents arrived at Evelyn Blackwell's estate in Beverly Hills, where she was hosting a charity brunch for 50 society women, all of them wearing pearls and designer dresses, all of them laughing at jokes about people like Nora Sinclair. The agents walked through the garden with their badges visible, boots leaving prints in the grass. Evelyn saw them coming and her face went rigid, her champagne flute stopping halfway to her lips. An agent approached her with careful courtesy. "Evelyn Blackwell, you are under arrest for conspiracy and obstruction of justice." The gasps from the other women were audible, a collective sound of disbelief and judgment. Evelyn tried to maintain her composure, her voice steady but pitched too high. "This is absurd. This is completely ridiculous. I have done nothing." The agent held up financial records printed on white paper. His voice was matter-of-fact, devastating. "You accepted payments totaling $32,000 from Douglas Hale to systematically destroy Nora Sinclair's reputation and employment prospects. You made false reports to Child Protective Services. You used your position on 3 school boards to blacklist her from volunteer opportunities. You made phone calls to potential employers specifically warning them against hiring her." Evelyn's perfect composure cracked. She reached for her phone, but the agent was already moving. Her lawyer arrived within the hour, but it was too late. Her accounts were frozen. Her memberships revoked. Her position on the boards ended by sunset. The society she had commanded for 2 decades watched her led away in handcuffs, her perfectly styled hair falling in her face, her designer dress stained with spilled champagne. She looked small suddenly, diminished, like someone who had been cut off from the power source that made her feel alive. Justice is not death. Death is too quick, too easy, too merciful for someone like Evelyn Blackwell. Justice is 40 years of watching the world move on without you. It is your name becoming synonymous with cruelty. It is seeing the people you once ruled over spit your name like a curse. By 3:16 p.m., every major news outlet in Los Angeles was running the story. By evening, it had spread to national news. By the next morning, Douglas Hale and Evelyn Blackwell were infamous, their faces on screens everywhere, their crimes detailed with precision that left no room for doubt or sympathy. But in the mansion in the hills, Nora did not see any of it. She sat with Emma on the bed, the child wrapped against her side, and simply breathed. Downstairs, Alindro watched the news reports come through with cold satisfaction. Vinny stood beside him, shoulders relaxed in a way they had not been in days. "It is finished," Vinny said. Alindro's response came quietly. "It is just beginning." He climbed the stairs to the guest suite where Nora sat, and when she looked up at him, something shifted in his expression. The hardness that usually lived there softened like ice meeting warmth. "You are safe now. Both of you. They cannot hurt you anymore." Nora's eyes filled with tears, but she did not cry. She simply nodded, holding Emma closer, feeling for the first time in months like she could breathe without drowning. Sometimes one hand reached out at the right moment can change an entire life. The news played silently on the television mounted above Alindro's mahogany desk, but Nora could read every word. Douglas Hale's face filled the screen, handcuffed, his expensive suit torn at the shoulder, his arrogance finally cracked like old paint. Evelyn Blackwell walked behind him in her designer dress, her perfectly styled hair falling into her face for the first time in her life. She looked small. Diminished. Like someone who had been cut off from the power source that made her feel alive. Nora stood frozen in the doorway of the study, her hands trembling. The apartment was so quiet you could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway, each second a small hammer strike against the silence. Alindro sat in his leather chair by the window, watching the news without expression. The afternoon light cut across his face, illuminating the scar that ran from his eye to his cheekbone. He did not turn when she entered. He simply waited. "You did this," Nora whispered. Her voice came out shattered like glass. "I gave the FBI what they needed." Alindro's response was quiet. Measured. They made their own decisions. Why? The word cracked in her throat. Why would you destroy two people for someone like me? He turned then, slowly, the way a man turns when he carries the weight of entire empires on his shoulders. His eyes, dark as storm clouds, met hers. Because you returned a wallet when you had $78 in your pocket, he said. Because you protected your daughter when the system abandoned you. Because you remind me that there are still people in this world who choose kindness when they have every reason to choose cruelty. He stood and crossed to her. Not in the commanding way he moved through his mansion with its chandeliers and armed guards. This was different. Slower. Like a man soothing a lost child. Come, he said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. Nora Saturday. The leather was warm from his body heat, and she realized he had been sitting there for hours, watching the news cycle destroy the two people who had tried to destroy her. My father used to lock me in a closet for days, Alindro continued, his voice low and solid like an oath. No food. No light. I would count the seconds until I thought I would die. When I finally escaped, I made myself a promise. No child would ever know that fear. Not if I could prevent it. Nora's tears came then, hot and fast. They fell without sound, the way rain falls on windows at 3 in the morning. Emma will not grow up looking over her shoulder, he said. She will not count dollars and ration food. She will not be afraid of the dark. I don't know how to repay you, Nora whispered. Alindro was quiet for a long moment. The clock in the hallway struck 2. Then 3. The afternoon shifted toward evening outside the windows. 2 years ago, I lost everything that mattered, he finally said. I had money. Power. Soldiers who would die at my word. But the one thing that gave my life meaning, the belief that there was still goodness in this world, I had lost that. He paused. You gave it back to me. You returned a wallet. You protected a child who was not yours. You stood alone against two people who had every advantage over you. And you stood anyway. His voice dropped even lower. We are even. But they both knew that was not true. The bond between them was not transactional. It was something deeper, two people broken in the same shape, learning to hold each other steady. Two people who had crawled through darkness and found light in the most unexpected place. Nora looked down at her hands. They were no longer shaking. In her lap lay the prayer card her grandmother had given her years ago, worn soft from being held during 1,000 sleepless nights. The same card she had clutched in her apartment on the night Alindro arrived. The night everything changed. 3 days passed like hours dissolving into water. The blizzard had cleared, leaving Los Angeles gleaming and cold. Nora's apartment building remained condemned, but Alindro's lawyers had moved with the precision of instruments. The foreclosure notice was erased. $22,000 paid in full. And in an account in her name, $125,000. Enough to start over. Enough to breathe. She insisted she would repay him. The conversation happened at his kitchen table, where morning light fell across plates of untouched food. Alindro simply looked at her, that steady, penetrating gaze that had once terrified her and now only made her feel seen. You will not repay me, he said. It was not cruel. It was fact. And I do not care. Emma asked if they could visit the mansion again. Her small voice came from the backseat of the car as Nora drove through residential streets she had never seen before, neighborhoods where children played safely and mothers did not work 3 jobs. You are welcome anytime, Alindro had answered. He knelt beside Emma's car seat so they were eye to eye. Whenever you want to come, we will be waiting. Nora watched them together, the most feared man in Los Angeles and a 6-year-old girl, and something broke open inside her chest. She saw herself in him, saw the care he took with Emma's small hand as he helped her from the car. She saw the man he had been before darkness found him, and she understood that she had not saved him exactly. Rather, they had saved each other, the way two people drowning in the same dark water can learn to float if they hold on. 6 months later, the world had moved on. Douglas Hale and Evelyn Blackwell sat in federal prison, their appeals denied, 40 years stretching before them like the long hallway of a nightmare with no waking point. The news had moved to other stories. Other scandals. Other lives destroyed and rebuilt and destroyed again. But in a small apartment in a neighborhood that had learned to feel like home, things were different. Nora worked as an office administrator now, a job where she sat at a desk and answered phones and wore clothes that did not smell like grease and desperation. Emma was in first grade at a school where the teachers knew her name and called home when she had a good day, not just when she was in trouble. The apartment had heat that worked properly. The refrigerator was never empty. There was a car in the driveway, an ordinary car, nothing fancy, but it ran and it was hers. The prayer card still sat on her nightstand. Alindro visited once a week. Sometimes he brought Vinny and Theo, his lieutenants, who had learned to expect the unexpected, their boss removing his shoes at the door, sitting at a kitchen table that was not marble, drinking terrible coffee that tasted like it had been made from rainwater and regret. "This coffee is undrinkable," he said once, his expression completely serious. "I know," Nora replied. "It gets worse every time." "I have noticed." He drank another cup anyway. Other times he came alone. He brought books for Emma, stories about brave girls and kind princes and worlds where magic was real. He sat while Nora told him about her day, a difficult client, a small victory, the way Emma had drawn a picture in school of a house with smoke coming from the chimney and labeled it "Our Happy." It was not romance. Not yet. But it was connection. The kind that grows slowly, like flowers pushing through snow. Two people who understood what it meant to crawl out of darkness. Two people who had learned that sometimes the strongest bonds are forged not in moments of passion, but in moments of simple presence. The sound of his car arriving became familiar. The leather of his jacket against her shoulder became familiar. His voice saying her name in that way he had, careful, as if the word itself might break, became the closest thing to a prayer she had found. And in the quiet spaces between words, in the ordinary moments of a life being rebuilt, they discovered that rescue moves in both directions. She had returned a wallet when she had nothing. He had given her back the right to breathe when she was already drowning. Sometimes one hand reached out at the right moment can change an entire life. If this story moved you, drop a like and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe so you do not miss tomorrow's story. And remember, one small act of kindness can change everything. We wish you good health, a joyful life, and days filled with peace and happiness. Thank you for watching. We will see you again in the next video. Goodbye.